Hello, Rick Serious Business Kackis here. Thank you for stopping by. Today, we are going to be discussing a massive update for Destiny 2. Luke Smith, director at Bungie, released his 2020 Director's Cut. Now, the last time Director's Cuts were released, it was before Shadowkeep, and it was outlining some of the massive changes coming to the entire, fabric of the game. Armor 2.0, the seasonal system, reward structure, very important stuff. And we have a repeat of that today. So we're going to be breaking down the info in this absolutely massive wall of text that is the 2020 Director's Cut. Now, this is coming off the heels of last night. The community reached the final 7th goal for the Imperium Foundation, and as soon as we did, a brand new trailer announcing Trials of Osiris, the marquee PvP activity coming next season, which has been revealed as Season of the Worthy. That all happened. If you want to watch my breakdown on that, get some context for what's going on in today's video, definitely I would recommend doing so. But let's get started with the 2020 Director's Cut. So, one of the first things talked about was the structure of the seasons and the massive amount of FOMO, or fear of missing out, that they currently have. The Bungie developers will spend a ton of time designing an activity like the Sundial. It is, I think, a great activity, but it only lasts for 3 months, and then it and its loot just disappears from the game. And that is maybe not the way to go. Players are kind of coming in and out of Destiny 2. They're picking the game back up after months of not playing, and sometimes the stuff that they were looking forward to do is gone from the game. Whereas previously you had expansions like Forsaken that didn't have that. You could play the first few weeks of Forsaken, sink your teeth into it, and then take a big break from the game, come back in several months, and those activities and that content was still there. If you never did beat the Shattered Throne dungeon, it's still there, still viable to play. And Bungie says that they need to be potentially working more towards that style of content. That stuff disappearing every single season is not necessarily the way to go. And another issue is core activities. Stuff like PvP and strikes, and therefore nightfalls, they're always in the game. Again, they are core activities. They are built for replayability. But then you have these activities like Sundial, which is only available for a limited amount of time, and so most people's attention is pulled towards that, and these don't really coincide. Luke Smith specifically mentions that potentially going forward in seasons, they're going to have to, he uses the example, what if we took the Sundial loot and spread it throughout the game? We had some of the Sundial weapons, dropping from strikes, dropping in the Crucible, and so you could play those core activities and it would somewhat rejuvenate them and you could still get part of the new content, which is what I've been asking for forever, so I'm glad they said that. In fact, he goes so far as to say, what if we had a seasonal theme and we used that theme to galvanized strikes? So we just went all in on strikes, and the seasonal activity, I think he's saying, was almost like strikes. There was a ton of new loot built into strikes, and some of them were remade. There were some new strikes added, but that's that seasonal activity. It's not necessarily a new activity like the Sundial, but it's just building up a core activity, and the same could be done, he also says, with PvP and putting some loot into the Crucible like the IS Luna. He actually uses that example from Destiny 1 to let players chase some new loot in those core activities. Now, he also comments that there needs to be more aspirational content, things that players are looking forward to do, and he comments on the fact that this is not just something for elite players who are just, playing the game 8 hours a day. Even casual players will still build up their characters, go and get loot, try to get better for that eventual aspirational content. Even if they never end up doing a raid, it's in the back of their mind and they're preparing for it and they're challenging themselves to improve their, skills and loadouts. So that's an important thing that Bungie is going to hopefully be ramping up, that aspirational content. Trials, of course, coming back and being the absolute aspirational PvP activity is a big thing, but something else that is really tied into that is weapons. And Luke Smith really dives into the massive problem at hand in Destiny 2 right now, which is why bother going for the new weapons? So there is so many different legendary weapons within Destiny 2, and so many of them have great roles, and this has created problems. Why go for the millionth Feeding Frenzy kill clip roll on, a certain gun? Because you already have one from 5 seasons ago, right? You already have a god roll from the Forsaken expansion, and maybe there's been like slight improvements on that god roll coming out in future seasons, but not really. It's maybe just slightly better in one aspect. And this also means that Bungie is having a hard time creating those truly like special guns, the Fatebringer and stuff back from Destiny 1 that were so iconic. They were firstly actually challenging to get. They didn't just drop, by the dozen like weapons are currently with the Imperium Foundation. And they were allowed to be truly powerful because Bungie had the knowledge that they were disappearing. This is one of the absolutely craziest things talked about today, and it's the fact that Infusion might be going away in a sense. So right now, you can use any gun in the entire history of Destiny 2. You can infuse it up to the current max light level and you can use it. And again, it's just creating so much bloat. There's so many different options. There are so many auto rifles. It's hard for a new auto rifle to stand out. It's hard for it to feel special. So, what Luke Smith actually says is that going forward, legendary weapons are going to have a lifespan, somewhere between 9 and 15 months. Essentially, a legendary weapon will have an infusion cap, a certain light level that it can't be infused above. So as the seasons move forward and as the light level increases and increases, you will have legendaries that just can't go any higher, and then they'll fall out of favor. That is a huge deal, and that is gonna spark quite the debate within the community, because I can remember back in Destiny 1, that was the case. You had the first set of weapons and stuff from the Vault of Glass and everything. It could only go up to a certain level, and then when the Dark Below came out, that stuff could go higher, and you needed that for the new content and so on, and you couldn't really justify using any of the old weapons. And then when the House of Wolves expansion came out, they actually introduced an infusion method and allowed you to use any of the weapons in the game. Honestly, that was one of my favorite parts of Destiny 1. I fell in love with the game truly with House of Wolves because it had so much variety in what you could use. So I am slightly skeptical about letting things fall off. With that being said, pretty much everything fell off with the Taken King, and then it was later reintroduced way further in the game with the Age of Triumph. So it's certainly something that has been done, and it is pretty impossible to argue that one of the ways of making the new gear super exciting is the fact that you have to use the new gear, right? You really are looking to acquire the new auto rifle with Feeding Frenzy and then Kill Clip if your old one is not going to be able to be infused. So that is something that will certainly spice up the loot pool. And I think having a lifespan of several months where it's not going to be gone after one single season, you're going to have it for, a whole year, I think that is a pretty fair compromise, and that is a really interesting change. I'm excited to see what they're doing with that, and if it will be applied retroactively. If coming next season, March 10th, suddenly your spare rations, it's going down to like 750, and it's staying there. It's not going to be able to be infused. That's a big deal. However, moving on from there, some more information Luke touched on. Number 1, faction rallies. He says a lot of people have been wondering if faction rallies will return, and he says they have no plans to bring back faction rallies, citing that the reward gear hasn't actually been used that much, the character cast is growing too large, and crucially, they didn't actually drive a bunch of engagement within the game. Like, players somewhat remember them fondly, but it's not like a bunch of people were logging on to do faction rallies, actually. So he does say, maybe in the future, who knows, but that there's some sweet gear and weapons that they're actually moving into the legendary engram loot pool in Season 10. So that legendary engram loot pool is getting pretty massive, honestly. The last hope And the old fashioned, etc., were added this season, and it looks like some old faction stuff is going to be added, of course, with random rolls coming March 10th. So be looking out for that. Moving on from there, bright engrams. So they say for season 10, they're doing away with purchasable bright engrams. You're not going to be able to buy it in the store because they want people to know the cost of something before they buy it, and bright engrams doesn't line up with that principle. They'll still appear for free in the season's pass, however. Moving on from there, New Light is getting a little bit of a new intro because they're underestimated how many people were going to join Destiny 2 when it became free to play, and they say that we're going to improve the New Light entry this fall and flesh the starting experience in Destiny out. Moving on from there, the quest log, the infamous quest log. It's very cluttered, it's very large, and they say that starting next season for season 10, it's going to be organized in different categories. So you're going to have like a seasonal category and so on. So it's going to be much easier to navigate and look at what you want to do. Guys, that is it for this massive piece of information. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, found it informative, and if you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickKackis. That's linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.